Hello, welcome back to the lecture series on Transport Layer Protocol. In this video, we are going to learn about Transport Layer Services. So what is the agenda? I will introduce you to Transport Layer Services, then make you understand about the need for process-to-process delivery of data. Then I will explain the difference between connectionless service and connection-oriented service. Then reliable service versus unreliable service would be discussed. So in order to introduce the process-to-process communication or transport layer services, let me tell you how the data is transferred from the one computer to the other computer through the nodes of the network in the Internet Protocol. We all know that in order that we transmit data, there is a term called node-to-node delivery of data. Now, this node-to-node delivery of data takes place at the data link layer. Here we have reliable data transfer. But this is not enough. We have to go for host-to-host delivery of data. And that happens at the network layer with the help of IP addressing schemes. Now, this host-to-host delivery of data is not reliable. It is based on best effort delivery. But to understand the process of data communication, we must understand that there is process-to-process data delivery. And that process-to-process data delivery takes place at the transport layer. Now, this is very important because process-to-process delivery means there are different application programs at the application layer. Now, these application programs, when they are in execution, are known as processes. Now, these processes from the application layer are transferred to the transport layer through the interface known as the socket. Now, in order that we have reliable process-to-process delivery of data, there must be reliable data transfer at the transport layer. Now, what are the responsibilities of transport layer? Transport layer mainly is responsible for process-to-process delivery of messages, as we have already learned. Then it is also responsible for connectionless service and connection-oriented service. Connectionless service means there is no setup path. And for connection-oriented services, we need a setup path. For connection-oriented service, we can use the protocol TCP or Transmission Control Protocol. And for connectionless service, we need a protocol which is UDP or User Datagram Protocol. Next, we look into reliable versus unreliable services. When we look into the reliable data transfer at the transport layer, we mean there should be proper flow and error control mechanisms. For unreliable services, we may not need this flow control and error control mechanisms. We will learn in details about the reliability and unreliability of services and connectionless and connection-oriented services. Now, what is process-to-process delivery? Let us look at this picture. See here, we have different processes running at the application layer. We have considered here, let's understand that this is a client-server application program. And let's say we have a client process running here and the server process running at this end. Now, you see here, there is a host here and another host at this point. This host can have a large number of application programs running at its own computer. So this is the local site. Whenever we want this process to be communicated from this host to this host, this is known as host-to-host delivery of data. But for reliable data transfer between two processes, we need process-to-process delivery of data, and this happens at the transport layer. Now, this host-to-host delivery of data happens at the network layer. Now, in order that this host gets communicated to this host at the other end, there may be large number of intermediate nodes. So these are basically the routers. They move through the internet and go at the other side of the server, having several nodes, intermediate nodes and routers. So whenever this data transfer takes place from one node to the other node, we call it node-to-node delivery of data, and this is reliable data transfer, and this happens at the data link layer. Now we need to understand client-server paradigm. There may be various process-to-process delivery, but client-server paradigm is of utmost importance. In client-server paradigm, there is a client process which runs at the client end, and there is a server process which runs at the server end. For example, if a client wants the date and time from the server, it makes a request. So there is a daytime client process running at the client end, and server, in receipt of this request, it runs the daytime process at the server end and gets the result and responds to the client with the result. So this is the client-server paradigm. So in order to understand client-server paradigm, we must understand four different terms. One is called the local host, second one is the local process, third one is the remote host, and the fourth one is a remote process. The local host is the client, local process is the daytime process, remote host is the server, and remote process is the daytime process at the server end. Now let us understand what is Internet Assigned Number Authority. Internet Assigned Number Authority gives some port numbers. So we have number one, well-known ports. These well-known ports, registered ports is the second category, and the third category is the dynamic ports. With the help of these ports, along with the IP address, the transport layer can communicate between two processes at the transport layer from the client end to the server end. Now, what are these port numbers? These port numbers are basically 16-bit numbers. So well-known ports start from 0 to 1023. These are controlled and assigned by Internet Assigned Number Authority, or IANA. Next, we have the registered ports. These ports are numbered from 1024 to 49151, and these are registered. These are not controlled and assigned by IANA, but these are registered just to prevent duplication. Then we have dynamic ports, which are numbered from 49152 to 65535. These ports are neither registered nor controlled by the IANA, and these are known as the ephemeral ports. So the ports are numbered from 0 to 65535. Next, we go to addressing. There can be three types of addressing. One addressing is at the data link layer. Data link layer means node-to-node delivery of data. Here we need the MAC address, or media access control address. This is mainly given by the NIC, or network interface card, by the manufacturer, and it resides within the computer. Then we have at the network layer the IP address, the 32-bit 4 bytes IPv4 addressing scheme. At the transport layer, the port numbers define the addresses of the processes. These are sometimes known as service access points. This is an example of daytime client and daytime server. The daytime client must have a port number 52000. It goes at the transport layer, and from the transport layer, the data along with the port number of the server, which is 13 here, and the port number of the client is passed to the daytime server. At the server end, the daytime server is run, and the result is transmitted back to the client in the form of this port number of the server, port number of the client, and the result. Next, we have the socket address. Socket is an interface between the application layer and the transport layer. So here the socket address means it consists of the IP address as well as the port number. The IP address, for example, it is 192.16.5.8 and the port number is 13. This is the example of daytime process. So the socket address will be IP address appended with the port number. So this is the socket address. For process-to-process delivery, we can have multiplexing. Multiplexing means many processes can be combined together and they can be passed through a single line. So many to one. At the receiving end, we can have demultiplexing, where all the processes which are intermingled and passed to the server computer are then looked into the port numbers. Based on the port numbers, they are fed to the different processes at the server end. So this is an example. There are different processes which are running at the client end. They can be multiplexed, so many to one. It goes to the network layer. With the help of the IP addressing, it passes through the internet and goes at the server end. At the server end again, it goes to the host based on the IP address. It is here demultiplexed. Demultiplexed means many to one. So based on the port numbers, the data is fed to the different processes of the server. Now we move on to connectionless versus connection-oriented services. Connectionless service means it is basically UDP or user datagram protocol. No path setup is required for the connectionless services, and it is used for small sized data. For connection-oriented services, mainly TCP is used, or transmission control protocol, and it is used for large sized data. Path setup is made before the transfer of the data, and at the end of data transfer, closure of the path is made by terminating the service. Let us now understand reliable versus unreliable service. Reliable service is one where data integrity takes place. That means whatever data you have sent from the sending end goes intact at the receiving end. For this purpose, we have flow and error control mechanisms. Example is TCP, or transmission control protocol. For unreliable service, data integrity is not there. No sequencing of data packets is there, and it is mainly used for small sized packets. Example is UDP, or user datagram protocol. So let's look at this example. Here we can see that this computer is connected to the LAN and to the router via WAN, then again one router to again one LAN. It is connected to this computer. This is host 2 and this is host 1. So that you can see here error checking is done from node to node at the data link layer, but not at the network layer. But error checking and flow control is done at the transport layer whenever we want process to process data delivery. At the router end, we can see here that it does not go up to the transport layer, and there is no process to process data flow and error control mechanism happening. To summarize, in this video, we have learned about the overview of transport layer services. We have learned about the process-to-process delivery of data, the meaning of service access points, or also known as service point address, or the port numbers at the transmission or the transport layer for different processes. We have understood how flow control and error control is done for reliability of data. Thank you.